Everybody, welcome back to another daily drop on the Heel Report, which is part of TarHeel247.com. A publisher, Andrew Jones. He is our basketball recruiting director and analyst, longtime college AAU and high school coach, David Sisk. And this is going to be a long form daily drop because David and I never do short form stuff because we just get to talking and talking and talking, and it goes on forever, seemingly. We're going to try to keep this thing inside a half hour today, so wish us luck. If not, then that means that you guys get extra daily drop talking Carolina basketball. That's the topic, David. They're 13 games in. The non-ACC part of the schedule is done. 12-1 record. I would like to have learned more. I wish they would have swapped out a couple of those patsies for some Atlantic 10, Missouri Valley, or low-end power conference opponents just to see them get pushed and tested a little bit more. But nonetheless, I think there was enough to have a pretty good handle on what this team does well, what's still lagging behind, and maybe some question marks about some aspects of the team that may not catch up to the rest of the club. And I want to begin there, and I want to talk about point guard. That is a concern that some people have expressed. I think it's a legitimate concern. You've got Kyan Evans and Derek Dixon. Dixon has done really well for a freshman. He's kind of serving as a backup point guard as a freshman might do in that role. But what kind of gets him more in the conversation, David, is people are not sure that Kyan Evans is where he needs to be as the point. Mm-hmm. So naturally the Derek Dixon part comes up. Where are you in the whole conversation about point guard, Kyan Evans, and Derek Dixon?
I think Derek Dixon needs to come on. And keep coming. I mean, he already has. I mean, if you look at him now and from the beginning of the year, there's obviously a big difference. And, you know, I got to give Hubert Davis credit with that, because one of the questions I had was you could take the Navy game and a Radford game and some of these where he got deep into the bench and didn't put the game at risk. They were well ahead. But you could see, like Navy, a 25-point lead go to 10, if you remember that game.
Yeah.
And I was saying at that time, well, maybe Hubert needs to go 6 or 7, and Trimble obviously was out of the lineup at that time. Go 7 and just stick with it. Go 6, just stick with it. That may have been the number. I'll go with this starting 5, whatever. But he stuck with that, and I got to give him credit. You know, if this is Colin Cowherd and we said where Colin's right and where Colin's wrong, I would say, well, where David was wrong was saying shorten the lineup out, because I think Hubert has developed a bench. I think with Trimble back now, he's probably got a solid 8, maybe 9. But I think in letting that come along, Derek Dixon and Jonathan Powell are going to be 2 guys to take and count on. There's more pressure on Derek Dixon at playing the point guard spot. And he's still going to be off and on, and I was probably not what you consider a strength yet. I do think a couple of things that he does. I think the game's slowing down for him. I had in the film review a couple of plays there that just kind of showed him against, and it was East Carolina. I understand that. But I feel like the game's slowing down. He's seeing things before they happen and as they happen. I think his fundamentals. I know Terrence Oglesby the other night was just love. He made the statement, Derek Dixon's quickly becoming one of my favorite players. And he had a play where he got the extra pass to the corner. It was a hard closeout. There was a shot fake. Guy leaves his feet, one dribble, bounce pass into Stevenson for the layup. He said, when's the last time in college basketball you saw somebody shot fake into a bounce pass into the post? And he's right. I mean, he's just fundamentally sound as they come. So I've got faith in him at that spot. There's going to be some growing pains. You got to remember, you still got 18 games, and if you count the ACC tournament, you've got probably 20 to 21 games going into the NCAA tournament. That's what it's all about, the NCAA tournament. You do all 5 months of play for hopefully more than one weekend, but 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, it's basically what it comes down to. It's preparation. He's still got a lot of work to do on the court as far as having the opportunity. He's going to have a whole ACC schedule, the ACC tournament. He's going to do it against good teams, and that's what you wanted to see. It's what I wanted to see. So I hope he can make that push to where late in the year we're not having this conversation. We say point guard could be an issue. Kyan Evans, I think he's really having a hard time adapting. And if we'll go back, I said it before the year started, I had my question marks at Colorado State. His analytics were good, but if you watched them play a game, and there were some good teams out there, San Diego State, some others, when they put the heat on the ball to bring it up the court, they had another guy bring it up. They moved him off the ball. And once they got it up court, he'd come back and get it, and they'd screen for him. So he was playing point guard per se without being the one to bring the ball up or to handle it against pressure. So that was kind of a red flag to me. And then as I got to watch him play, I thought he was better off the ball than he was on the ball. Evan Maikawa had him coming in as one of the 10 best three-point shooters in the country. He's not lived up to that. But when you do that, that has nothing to do with playing a point guard role. So I just think he's probably more comfortable off the ball. And then when you do that, he's small. You're going back to R.J. Kadoth deal where you've got a small lineup on the court. You don't want to go back there. And I just watch him. All these games, I think that's another red flag to me where he's like 0 for 3. And you're like, why is a guy who can shoot the ball the way he can shoot it, why is he only taking 3 shots? So what that tells me is he's really not understanding how to mix being a good shooter and being able to run the team from the point guard spot and put those together. So I just think right now there's just I just don't think he's really has got to the point yet what he understands, and let alone doing it, but really understanding what he needs to do. I just don't think it's there.
He's a good basketball player who right now looks like he's kind of in the wrong situation. When I say wrong situation, I'm not saying in North Carolina's the wrong place for him. The progress that you would like to have seen from game 1 to game 13, even against the ECUs of the world, we haven't seen a lot of comfort, even when he's done something right. And his assist to turnover ratio has been pretty good. He's been better than a lot of people say defensively. I think he's been pretty solid defensively. He's got an amazing attitude, and he understands that he is, trying to chisel away at a big iceberg, which is different than what he dealt with before. Mm-hmm. But he could chisel and chisel and chisel, and looks like the iceberg looks the same. We haven't really seen the iceberg change. And you see with Derek Dixon, sort of a slow progression. He's a heads-up player. Kyan's a head-down player sometimes, especially when he's on the ball trying to run something. If he goes off the ball, the head's up more. And he gets it back on the wing, the head's up more. A lot of his assists are coming from the wing. Derek also, in Kentucky, the last 8 minutes, Ohio State the last 6 minutes, Derek's on the floor, not Kyan. So I think that Hubert knows that, look, he believes Kyan's going to get there. And he needs the bulk of the minutes and needs to start in order to get there, but they had to win those 2 games. Yeah. So he had to go with the guy that he knows is going to get them into every set that he wants on one end and is going to do a solid enough job staying in front of the ball defensively on the other end. Is that kind of your read on this? And Hubert realizes it's a long season. They still have more time to get this worked out with Kyan, because if it does and he becomes the player for Carolina that Hubert envisions he can be, then that changes them, because Derek then is a really good backup and Kyan becomes the starting point guard for this group that they need.
I go back to the tight games that you're talking about, Ohio State in particular. That's been pretty well lit since Thanksgiving. And so you saw the rotations, what they were late. And the last 10 minutes, basically, of the ball game, when it was on the line. And that's who we had faith in. And I think if you did a poll and you just asked North Carolina fans, okay, there's 10 minutes left in the game, North Carolina's ahead by 2, who do you want getting the majority of the time at the point guard spot, Derek Dixon or Kyan Evans? I think Derek Dixon would win the landslide.
I agree.
And it's just maybe not the big plays, but trust is going to be a huge issue. And I think the question the coaching staff as the season winds on, hopefully it comes on for Kyan. There's an ability for a guy to make plays, but North Carolina's got guys on the floor to make plays this year outside the point guard role. The question is going to be, who do you trust?
Yeah.
And Bobby Knight used to always say, he said, bad plays lose more ball games than good plays win. And I'm a firm believer in that. I believe Hubert Davis does too. I think all the old heads believe that. So that's going to be the issue. I just see Derek Dixon. Derek Dixon, to me, knows how to play the point. And it's not for him learning it. I think he knows what to do. It's just a freshman going into the college game and making those progressions. So he's got that idea. And to me, his scoring is, hey, if I come off a ball screen and it's like Kentucky and I can get to I left Kentucky game out. That was after Michigan State. I apologize for that. So he hit those last two shots. The one maybe kind of pulled it out a little bit. But the layup, he took what was there. That Hedge, who was in a bad spot, and he got to the rim and made that left-handed layup, and that was the game there. And then playing down the stretch against Ohio State, it's like, hey, if it's there, I'll take it. If not, I know how to distribute. I know how to get the ball to other people, whereas Evans is just not – I'm not really sure when am I not supposed to shoot the ball at all as a point guard? What? Where I think that Dixon has that understanding. And like I said, if he's wide open, he's going to take the shot. If he comes off a ball screen and he's in space, he'll take the shot. But he's not going to force it. He's not going to pass up open looks. To me, he's got a handle. It's just getting a freshman experience. He's got a handle on what he wants to do.
Have you seen much progress from Kyan that would give you tremendous confidence as a head coach that he can get the keys at some point and run it for 35 minutes in February on the road in an ACC game?
Not tremendous confidence, tremendous confidence would be when you said, okay, I'll send you a Zoom link and we'll go on at 2:00. I had tremendous confidence that we would go on somewhere around 2:00 because you told me that, and you're like clockwork, Andrew. But I would
late today.
But I said around 2. You notice I didn't say exactly at 2.
Yeah.
So, but with Kyan, here's the thing. Like I said, that those 20 to 21 games before the NCAA tournament that North Carolina still has, that just doesn't go for Derek Dixon. That goes for Kyan Evans as well. Yeah, Kyan Evans has those 20. So and here's the good thing. I know we're going to talk about the the January road skate, 5 out of 8, I think you said, on the road, and you've got a lot of quad one wins. But I think you're going to have some situations to where you can give him reps at the point, and you can give these guys where they're going to have a pretty steady lead, but it's going to be against better teams, and you can just keep working at it and working it. And that's the thing. I think it's hard to go in November unless you really got a lot of red flags or you've got a lot of green ones that this is what a team's going to be, because that's a beauty of coaching. You get to work at it and work at it and work at it, and you juggle lineups and you change strategies, and you're like, hey, why don't we try this? There's so much to tinker with. It's such a long season. I mean, you've got 4 full months that you play before you ever get into the postseason. So they're the best in the world at what they do. And so there's going to, by the time they get to the ACC tournament, there's going to be no stone unturned. And it's like, okay, we've ran out of time to progress. Now unless we're sure of what we have, we know we don't have it. So as they get into the tournament, the coaches are going to say, hey, this is what we can trust. We know what we have going into postseason play. But like I said, there's still 2 full months to develop.
Trust is a word you've brought up, I believe, 3 times already, and I think it's one of the signature words of this team in this season. I told you about a conversation I had with somebody before the season started, somebody in the program very close to everything, and they said, look, Hubert knows basketball as well as anybody. The coaches around the country know that he knows basketball. He could talk it at an exceptionally high level. The one thing he needs to do, and his next step as a head coach in year 5, is learn to trust his players more. And that's been a problem. It's been something he hasn't easily done in the past. I think we've seen a shift there in the last couple of months, in the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks with Hubert, trusting guys more. At first, I wasn't sure how on earth Jonathan Powell was going to find his way to kind of fit into what they're doing. I think he has. I think Hubert trusts Jonathan Powell. I think Hubert trusts Derek Dixon. I think he trusts that Kyan will be the guy he thinks he's going to be. I think he now trusts Jaden Young. Jaden Young's playing every game now. He wasn't earlier. Now he's getting into games, and he's got the green light to shoot it, that thing every time he gets it, as soon as he gets in. I think the trust factor for Hubert with this team is a significant step forward, and part of why they're better than they were a year ago, and I think in better position with the head coach in the previous 4 years because the trust factor is higher. So, the first question is, do you see him trusting more? And B, how much do you think that's going to help moving forward as Hubert continues with Jaron Stevenson at the 5, continues with Jonathan Powell getting between 16 and 25 minutes, depending on the situation, and ultimately how he handles the point guard. One of those two guys is going to get 32 minutes on the road in the ACC at some point. They have to be that team going into March. I think it's going to be very difficult to navigate March the way the fan base wants to and the staff wants to if they're still kind of going 18 and 22 with the point guard situation. I'm not sure that they can do that and be the team they want to be. Moving forward, where do you see him trusting, and where are going to be some of the challenges for him to find trust?
Well, I understand what you're saying about the trust. I see more trust this year, just simply that you don't see them pulling a ball out in the middle of a secondary break and setting set plays, letting them play more. So I see that. But let me say this as somebody who coached 30 years. And I would tell kids this all the time. If you're waiting on me to build your confidence, then you're a lost cause. I can't build your confidence. You have to build your own confidence as a player. And I'll hear somebody, a parent or somebody, and I've done it before, and I'm not even talking about teams that I'm involved in. I've been out of it now for 2 years. And I'll hear somebody talk about a coach, and they'll say, well, coach just destroyed junior's confidence. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Coach is not responsible for junior's confidence, okay? And I spoke about this where I teach at. Our girls' high school coach here is highly, highly, highly successful. Her winning percentage is probably 900. And we talk about this all the time. And she tells them, she said, you know something, when I played, she said, and she played high level. And she said she was Division I. And she said, I don't understand it. He said, when players tell me that they're nervous or they're unconfident, she said, I don't understand it. She said, I was never unconfident. She said, because I lived in a gym. And she said, everything that I was going to do in a game, I'd done it thousands of times in the gym, working on my craft. So, yes, Hubert Davis wants to have trust in players, but that is not his responsibility. It is the responsibility of Kyan Evans, of Derek Dixon, of Jonathan Powell, of Caleb Wilson, Henry Vayasar, Luka Bogovic, Seth Trimble, whoever. It's their job and their role to say, hey, I'm going to be the type of player you're going to be confident in, but I'm the only one that can control that. I've got to become that kind of player. Shane Battier, and excuse me for quoting Shane Battier on the North Carolina podcast, but he said one of the favorite things that I've ever heard as a player, and I've used this one on my kids for years because he said it 20 years ago. He said, my job as a player is to do everything so hard and so well that the coach says there's no way I can take him out of the game. So, so how do you juggle 18, 22 at the point guard spot? This is going to be your teammates and you play together. But Derek Dixon's attitude needs to be, hey, I don't care if I'm a freshman, I'm getting all 40 of them. That's what Michael Jordan's would have been. That's what Phil Ford's would have been. That's what James Worthy's would have been. So that I'm getting those minutes. Kyan Evans needs to have the same mindset. So,
Coach,
you need to those players. Let me say this. I'll let you have it. Those players need to develop their game to where they say, I'm not asking coach to trust me. I'm putting my game to the point that he's going to have no choice but to trust me. And that's going to be that. It's up to me. That's my responsibility.
As a coach, there are times, this has been a criticism, and I've seen it a few times, but I also know, being around the sport for a long time at this level, that there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that fans never know about. Allowing a kid to play through a mistake or two. I think that's one thing people are talking about or pointing to right now, and that's one thing I see. But I also see him doing that with Jonathan Powell. Jonathan Powell started last year for 30 games in the Big 12 on a team that also made the tournament. You see him doing it with Jaren. People are like, God, Jaren can't shoot. Got to get him out of the game. Jaren started 20-some-odd games for Alabama, Nate Oates last year. Jaren Stevenson might be why Alabama won the Elite Eight 2 years ago and got to the Final Four. So he's doing it with guys that have done something before and have played. And I also think part of this discussion is he's just got more at his disposal now, and that makes it easier to leave a guy in, or easier to trust a guy, or easier to put a guy in situations where they can be more successful. Last year they were small. They went when Ian Jackson was the de facto four-man, and it changed his offensive output because his shots came in different ways. That was a byproduct of just having not much else to put on the floor. Now, on your bench, you've got a guy who started 30 games at West Virginia last year. You got a guy who started 20-some-odd games at Alabama last year. You've got the Washington, D.C. area Metro Player of the Year, who played in the best conference in high school basketball. And then the ninth man, if you will, is a guy who started the second half of the year at Virginia Tech, scored 27 and 26 in ACC games. Is it a lot easier to trust when you've got that on your bench?
It is. You got to keep in mind, too, North Carolina's only had 3 close games. Michigan State, I know it got up to double digits, but it was a tie game with 8 minutes left. And Michigan State didn't pull away in that one until about the last 2. Kentucky last possession, Ohio State last possession. And so he found his lineups and those that he went with. And I believe that's right now what the ones he went with late is what he's more comfortable in. But most of these games, he can let them play through that stuff because they've been comfortably ahead. So you remember, I'll date myself and I'll date you too. You remember the Gong Show?
Mm-hmm.
And you remember Mean Gene, the dancing machine?
I do.
You remember the big cane that came out and pulled him up? So we've not seen the big cane yet, like Hubert Davis has, to just pull him off the court, you know. And so he's letting them play through stuff. I can't think of one time really where a guy's missed a shot. He's only been in 30 seconds. And he missed a shot. And he gets yanked. I can't. Now, I'm going to say this. There was a play, and I'm trying to remember which game because I've watched every one of these games about 3 or 4 times. They all start running together. There was a play where there was a situation, and it may have already been planned that way, so I don't know if that was. But Kyan Evans had 2 or 3 plays in a row that weren't exactly what you wanted. And the last one, he ended up pulling about a 27-footer. And he did come out next to that ball. That may have already been planned because he'd been out there on the floor several times. That's been about the only time I can think of where I'm like, Hubert's trying to maybe send a message right here. And so he's kind of let them play through stuff. But like I said, they've had comfortable leads too. So when they got down to Ohio State, when they got down to Kentucky, he had his – now they had their lineup. They changed the lineup a little bit when they went into the press against Ohio State. He threw a press lineup out there. But that's been about the extent of it. So I'm interested to see. Well, no more close games they have as they get into ACC. And I hope they have some close games coming up here in January, because I think that'll kind of answer some questions. If they get 2 or 3 close games in a row and you see the last 6 to 8 minutes, this has been the rotation each time, we're going to have a lot better idea.
The defensive changes that you're talking about at the end of the Ohio State game, they were made possible by having a longer bench, which gave him flexibility. And credit him for using that flexibility. When he put Powell in, and Dixon came out, he had Powell, Stevenson, and Trimble on the floor. They're 3 best defensive players, and it was like 5-on-7. Stevenson got the key steal. To juxtapose what you were saying about pulling guys out, I hate to bring them up, but I'm going to bring them up anyway, because people are going to point to Minnesota and say, oh, Hubert screwed up. No, you can hit on that, elaborate on that in a minute. But last year in Lawrence, Kansas, second game of the year, he puts Cade Tyson in. Cade has an air ball, a foul, and then has a totally botched defensive assignment. He played 61 seconds, came out. That was it. He wasn't really a factor again the rest of the way and the prominent part of the rotation. That was one of those moments where maybe the coach realized, okay, he just doesn't fit with us, whatever the case is. In moving forward now, do you think maybe he learned something? Say maybe he was better, and psychologically, you say a coach can't or shouldn't give confidence, but sometimes a coach can squash confidence if a kid's not playing well. It comes with the kid not playing well first, and then how a coach handles it. There was a lot of questions or criticism either of Cade and Hubert or both together with that situation when the 61-second leash was there. And this group, we haven't seen that. So my point is to juxtapose that it happened a year ago. It's not happening now with this club. And it does speak a little bit to what you were saying about how the kid has to perform, but the coach is on the other side of the equation too. And nobody's given him that 61-second scenario this year, though. That's part of it as well.
Yeah, but you were talking about all those botched plays back to back to back to back.
Yeah, it was all.
And once that's one thing, but when it keeps happening, I mean, you almost have to take a time out to get a guy out. You're praying for a good ball.
Yeah.
Look, Cade Tyson had several more chances now, he might not have been playing 20 minutes a game. I don't live far from Nashville. I know Casey Alexander well, coached Casey Alexander years ago. And when he was just starting out, Rick Byrd, coached at Belmont. We were coaching in it. When I started, we were coaching NAIA together. Belmont was in our league. Lipscomb was in our league. And I coached guys at AAU. I probably coached 10 guys that played at Belmont. I know that program well. And I watched him at Belmont. And he was really good. And I thought they'd got a big pickup. The player that I've seen before and since is not the same guy I saw at North Carolina, because he got other chances. And when he's got a wide open 3 from corner and he's hitting them off the top corner of the backboard, and I mean, shots not even close.
Yeah.
And I remember late in the season, he finally made one. Everybody went to the bench and everybody went crazy. He's like, all right, he made one. And I'm like, man, this guy's like one of the best shooters in the world. And we're celebrating because he made one. I don't know. It's inexplainable, but somewhere there, his confidence got gone in a hurry.
Yeah.
And you can see, I've seen guys do it. I've seen guys check out before the season even begins. They're checked out by the middle of October going through practices because they know who the starting 5 is. They know each day in practice 5-on-5, and you know before the season ever starts, you can figure out in practice, and you're saying, hey, you know something? I'm the 8th guy. I'm the 12th guy. I'm the 2nd guy. I'm the 15th guy. You know, they may have lost him before the season ever started. And I don't know, but, you know, he's at the right place now, and he was at the right place before. And he's just one of the – why would a guy like – you think about the players who were sensational at other places – in Major League Baseball throughout the years, and go to the Yankees and just look like a bum, Andrew. I mean, you couldn't count them on your hands and feet over the years. Some guy went to Cy Young somewhere else and go to New York and have a 25 ERA, could strike me out. And how many of those? I mean, so when you go to North Carolina, it ain't for everybody. There's pressure there. There's banners there. And trust me, I know I coached at a place that came off a state championship. They had banners hanging everywhere. Banners will kill you if that gets in your psyche. So it's not for everybody.
Okay, let's circle back to Kyan Evans here. And the reason I bring it up is because Terrence Oglesby, whom you know, he did a little part in a podcast the other day on Field of 68, which they have some really good discussions there. There's some guys that really know ball there. And he brought up the Cade Tyson comparison with Kyan Evans. And I thought it was very interesting and very delicate how he went about it, because you can really throw people off if you try to put them into the same sentence. But the reason I'm going about it this way is to draw an understanding. Kyan Evans is trying to run the point with all that laundry up there. And that's a big deal. He's also trying to run the point in a system that's different from what he was in at Colorado State. And then I'm going to add this to it. When we had Kyan in a press conference at the Smith Center back in late September, he was talking about being a point guard, learning to be a point guard. His whole focus is being point guard. Then I asked him late in the press conference, give us a self-scouting report. First thing he said was, I'm a three-point scorer. I'm a perimeter shooter. I'm one of the best shooters in the country. That's the first thing he said after telling us for 20 minutes he's a point guard, 15 minutes he's a point guard. So you're talking about that mental wall that he has to hurdle from, I'm a great perimeter shooter, and the numbers back that up. And I helped Nick Clifford become a first-round pick because of my ability to take some pressure off him by scoring last year. And oh, by the way, we almost got to the Sweet 16, to suddenly – I've got to get it into this 7-footer who could score myriad ways. I got to get it into maybe the best first or second best freshman in the country is going to be a lottery pick. And you got this guy Trimble over here. And suddenly he's got a completely different role. His mind 3 months ago, I'm the best shooter, but I'm also trying to be like he was trying to talk himself into being the point guard. So psyche is a thing. Tyson's an example of that. So when you watch Kyan Evans play, where do you think his psyche is at this point?
Terrence said Monday night, so he did the color game at East Carolina. He made comparison with what he was doing at Colorado State and what the difference was and the type of players that he had around him. And it's a different lineup. It's a different style. It's a different role. I think I'm not going to go so far yet. I think to say that they might have miscalculated in the portal on that one. I'm not going to go that far. But I would think that only this reason, because I've told you myself before this season, I did not think he was point guard. And so that's what they brought him in for. But now you got to remember too, they also needed more outside shooting. So he was looking at outside shooting too. Powell, good outside shooter. Jaden Young, good outside shooter. They're bringing in Dixon, good outside shooter. Boglot's good outside shooter. They're bringing in guys who can all shoot the ball. And that's something we talked about before the year started.
Yeah.
But I just still wasn't convinced, and I'm not convinced that he's a pure point guard. I hope he convinces me. I hope he can. But most importantly, he needs to convince Hubert Davis, because that's who's going to make that decision. But it's a change. And even like Terrence said, that different roster. If you look at what Colorado State had, how they scored, how they went about things. And like I said, when the pressure really got on them, it was notable to me that they moved him off the ball, going back and watching their games. So that made me wonder a little bit. So we got these games to see. And I hate to keep going back to that. I'm just saying, just being as honest as I can be. Right now, I'm not convinced that he's the guy and carry them at the point guard spot. The good news is he's got time to become that. Only he can answer that moving forward.
Another area that has been a concern for a lot of people that either observe this team professionally or emotionally, the fans, has been the backup 5 spot. what was going to happen with the backup 5 spot. They had, going up to the Ohio State game, 11 games where Hubert gave Zayden High a lot of opportunity and then started giving James Brown opportunities ahead of Zayden, which was a surprise because I was told by multiple people in the program that there were times Zayden was the best player at practice and that Zayden had a great offseason. I was told he would play 12 to 15
Did everybody have the flu during that practice?
And I was told, hey, 12 to 15 because he's earned it, not because they need to sit Henry that much, because that was back when no one knew if Henry could play 35 or not. So the season begins and they start playing games. And the problems that Zayden High had when he looked rusty in early November, getting his legs crossed up constantly on defense, getting hammered in some pick and rolls and stuff, were still happening. So Hubert goes to James Brown first in the Michigan State game. So I was talking in Rupp Arena before the game, somebody who knows a thing or two about what's going on in the program. I asked about that, and they said it was just to kind of switch things up, just to see what James would do, because Zayden hadn't made the progress at all. He was still at the same point he was when they played Central Arkansas. Speed up to the Ohio State week. We had been talking on podcasts. I said it multiple times with Jacob. I really thought Jaron should be the backup 5 because he's the thickest guy on the team. And
we've already discussed this.
Yeah, you can run the entire offense with him.
Weeks.
You can run the entire offense with him. And then lo and behold, there he is as the backup 5 against Ohio State. And the one thing defensively he can do better than anybody on the roster that could play the 5 is if he gets caught in a switch and he's on a point guard or a guy that can drive, he can wall him off. That's what he did to Bruce Thornton once in that game. And you saw where suddenly there's more stuff in Jaron Stevenson's gameplay in the 5. He also got minutes at the 4 and the 3, played 27 minutes. Moving forward, is he the answer at the backup 5 in your opinion? And have we basically seen the last of James Brown and Zayden High unless circumstances dictate that they need some time on the floor?
We have – I'm going to say we've probably seen really the dwindling of that unless there's God forbid there's an injury. And my thing, and we'll go on to Stevenson in a second. Let me start with James Brown and Zayden High, and I'll get that out of the way a little bit. And like I said, when I come on here, I just try to be honest.
Yeah.
And you do too. And these are not personal knocks when we say this. We are that's our job to. And the fans, you're not watching this to see how I feel personally about somebody.
No.
So Zayden High and James Brown, I've had my doubts. I've had them. I had them with James Brown when I watched him in EYBL. I had them with Zayden High that freshman year, and I'd have somebody text me and they said, hey, maybe Zayden will be eligible next year. And I'm like, it don't matter if he's eligible or not. He's not the answer. Yeah. So you're hoping there's that progression, but I've watched him. I can't watch James Brown play, and you tell me that where he's made big improvements since his freshman year. I can't watch Zayden High play, and you tell me where there are big progressions since 2023 because he was out. They look to me like the same player. Yeah. And so you've got to go somewhere else. Obviously, those are not the answer. Now, I'm going to say this while I'm at it. If I had a criticism of the North Carolina coaching staff, and you'd say, okay, if you was one thing that you would critique them on and criticize them on, what would it be? I think they've not done a good job of player evaluations, big men player evaluations out of high school. Now, they've hit it good on the portal on some of these guys. Obviously, this year they struck gold with Manic. They've struck gold this year with Visar. They struck gold 2 years ago with Harrison Ingram at the 4. Yeah. They've done a good job out of the portal. But I look at the high school guys that they brought in, and I've seen it when I watched them play in high school, and I said, man, I hope they got a better night than I have. I just don't see it. So that would be the thing. I mean, Armando Baycott carried him at the 5 for about 3 years, and he's a holdover from Roy. So where was their big? Well, Caleb Wilson and Visar. So they've done a very good job with Caleb Wilson, and they did a great job bringing in Visar. Like I said, Manic, Ingram, they've done well out of the portal. That's why I'm saying next year, and people ask me, okay, if Visar's gone and Wilson's gone, who's the high school player who's out there? And I'm saying it's not out there. You go get you a senior citizen out of the portal. You get you a grown man who's already developed, who's strong, who's not going to have to go get in the weight room solid for a year and has had success. They're going to be out there. Heck, I saw yesterday where Coffee Cockburn has been contacted by 5 schools. You remember the big guy in Illinois a couple of years ago? Those guys can come back. You could bring you in a 28-year-old next year with everything that's happened this week. So it's unlimited what the options are. Okay, so I'll get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Now let's go to Jaron Stevenson. We said it. I thought they were better because of the size that you could even slide Caleb Wilson to the 5 and play Jaron at the 4 and vice versa. Now you put them down there against a brute. And then you have some problems, and that's where you wish that your true big men you're getting more out of them. But we all saw, how many people have you heard say with the big guy that East Carolina had? He was a beast.
Yeah.
And Brown and Zayden Hyde just bounced off him. And he dunked everything. And everybody was saying, God, man, I wish we had something like that coming off the bench. I wish he played for us. And this is East Carolina. It's like the 270th ranked team in the country, according to Ken Palm. And you don't have anybody that looks like that. So the big brutes, I'm not saying that's the end all, because I still think you're lean and thin when you get in against these monsters. If they played Kentucky again and Kentucky would have had Jaden Quaintance, thankfully that didn't happen. So you've seen the big, strong guys that Michigan State had. The center for Ohio State looked pretty good against them. And so you have some of those guys, but it's the best option right now. I'm not saying it's the greatest option because they're a little light in the britches, but it's the best option, I think, moving forward. And here's the thing. They don't have to play 40 minutes at that spot. I mean, if Visar's resting, he's playing 32, then you've got about 7 or 8 minutes a game. You're going out of a 40-minute game that you're going to have to do that. But I do think it's a talented option. I think it's the best option. Not big, strong guys, but it'll work.
I also think it could bring out a little more toughness from Jaron's game that has probably been needed as well. I think that Hubert would probably like to get a little bit higher rebounding percentage from the 3 spot when he's the 3, especially when you think about his length. And by the way, Jaden Quaintance is an enormous human being. I saw him in person last week in Atlanta. That's a big dude, and I agree with you. That could have made a very big difference in that game. All right, moving forward, Seth Trimble's been back for 2 games now. I talked to Seth Monday after the ECU game, and somebody had asked him a question about, give a scouting report on what the defense was before, where you think you need to get better. And he said that we need to defend for all 35 seconds, that sometimes they would be phenomenal and they'd kind of let up a little bit late with a foul or someone would leak out and it would end and the possession would end up not being as productive as they wanted to be. They wouldn't blank them on the possession. He did say, and I asked him specifically this, that they're not switching as much when he's on the floor, obviously, because he doesn't need to switch. If you put him on Bruce Thornton, you don't want him switching off Bruce Thornton. Just like when they played Darren Peterson in Kansas, you don't want him switching off that.
Yeah.
How much better does he make them defensively because they don't have to switch as much? Because I think they got themselves in bad matchups too often with switches that were unnecessary prior to him coming back.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said on that one. If you watch them, let's go back to the Ohio State game. So there's 2 possessions back to back where Thornton's in a high ball screen. So the first one, they get a switch and Dixon ends up on him.
Yep.
So Thornton would snake. He'd get down in a crab dribble. They'd go over the top, and you'd watch him. He'd just stop and get down in a catcher's stance almost, and just pin him back on his back hip.
Yep.
And they keep him there, and he'd wait on the big to roll, and then he's just totally got control of it. He's got the guy pinned, and he's going to go wherever he knows where to go. So he faded away off to his left and hit it was a tough 2-point jumper, but Thornton could hit tough 2-point jumpers all day long. So the next trip they run the same thing. And they reversed back. It didn't switch. If you remember that, they went out of their way not to switch because they were in switch position and they crossed to get back to where they were at. So Trimble's on Thornton. Trimble ended up on his outside hip, and Thornton does the same thing, sits and squats and waits. And Trimble, because he's on the outside and he's such a great jumper, pushes him back right, and Caleb Wilson's standing right there waiting on him. So he has to shoot about a 10-foot hard floater with Trimble hanging all over it.
Floating. He was tailing toward the baseline when he shot.
Yeah. So that play right there, and so they got caught in switch one time and they really didn't want to, and the next time they didn't. So they're keeping him on the best defensive option. And most of the time that was Thornton. We go back to Peterson. They didn't have anybody else on that team that could have guarded Darren Peterson the way Trimble guarded him. But you already had a really good defensive team. And I think he comes back now and probably makes them a great defensive team, potentially great. But I did the statistical story. And if you go down to defensive stat lines, they're number one in defensive field goal shooting efficiency. They're number one in the country in defensive true shooting. They're like up at the very top in points allowed. They're up at the top in defensive field goal shooting total. They're up at the top in defensive 2-point shooting. They're at the top in defensive 3-point shooting. They are elite in almost every category. The only one they don't is defensive rebounding. That's their weakness right now. So you talked about finishing the possessions. You don't finish the possession until you get possession of the ball.
Exactly.
I think sometimes that's where we talk about them being a little light, the seat of the pants in the post. The big guy for East Carolina was just, they were having to fight him off and they just couldn't grab the ball.
Well, and
we saw some of that at Ohio State 7-footer where they got it and they just can't corral it. And I think they get some of that. I think they're pretty good at boxing out. But I think they lose some of that.
They've been better. They've been better of late, more consistent of late. And I think a lot of that is Jaron boxes out. Stevenson and Brown, High and Brown don't box out every time. So you've increased your box out percentage. Let me stay on this with Seth being out there, them not switching as much. The big kid from ECU took advantage of a couple of matchups because of switches. He was able to score, but he still bullied Henry some. I think Henry was avoiding the foul because of where the game was at that point in time. But I do believe that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But with Seth out there and them not switching, they should be better with defensive rebounding because the bigs are going to be down there instead of a lot of the offensive rebounds they've given up have been mismatch situations. So if you're not switching as much, you're not going to find those mismatch situations either on post scoring or on going after a team going after their own missed shots. The other thing I think that's going to be even better is the rim protection. Henry's not going to block 100 shots, but he's going to make people think twice about a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you've got Caleb on the help side as well. If you go back to that key play at the end of the Ohio State game with the offensive rebound putback, they were both there to block it. Not just one, but they were both there to block it. Maybe Caleb was a little out of position at the time, but he was still there. And I think that hammers home the point that you've got two guys that can affect stuff around the rim. And if they're not dragged out all over the place and they get in bad switches where they're guarding a guy penetrating or someone who kicks and hangs, they're there to get rebounds. They're there to defend the rim a little bit more. I actually think they can be – their numbers are good with Seth only playing in 9 games, David. Imagine Seth playing every game and them having the defensive rebounding at a higher percentage because of where they are and being able to more consistently affect the rim. They should be even better moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if you look at their numbers, and you'd have to go back and look at that story, and I can't remember the exact rankings off the top of my head, but 2-point shooting, like I said, they were at the very top of the country in 2-point shooting defense, but they're not in block shots, which means they're adjusting more shots than their block, a lot more. But That's what that length does. But the eye test can tell you that, as you said. Now, if you watch them, Wilson will switch a lot. They guard off the ball screen totally different with Caleb Wilson than they do with Henry.
Yeah.
Henry's going to drop. Caleb Wilson will just come out and switch. And unless, like you said, maybe not with Trimble. If that's a certain one that they've got to have him on. So it might be this, that you understand, okay, let's say Trimble's guarding the 2 and Visar's not going to switch on anybody. So if you're Caleb and the guards, we'll switch to 1-4. We'll switch to 1-3. We won't switch anything with a 2. We'll switch to 3-4. That's where you've got to really be into the scouting report and know and being able to communicate that, because there are certain things you're going to switch and then there are certain things that you're not. You've got to be able to communicate that.
A couple things on that. That's, I think, where you have, again, Jaron at the 5 as the backup. Jaron got caught in a switch on Thornton. Didn't let him get to the rim in the Ohio State game. He can switch if you have to switch with the 5.
So you've got that defensive versatility, because Jaron Stevenson's like Caleb. Jaron Stevenson can go. Like I said, now Henry's not out on the floor in that situation. That's huge. So they're not dropping as much with those guys. But yeah, I mean, you can put Caleb Wilson and Jaron Stevenson on anybody out there on the floor, unless it's a 300-pound 5, and feel pretty good about it.
100%. Offensively, I asked Seth, do you guys run fewer sets because you're on the floor? And that's been a thing I've harped on a lot, and I've kind of waffled back and forth as we see the team evolve. I do understand the need to run sets because you have to be determined to get one of those 2 guys to touch every possession. And the way you can assure that is to run a lot of sets to make sure the ball goes through the post and comes back out or stays in the post. And then with Henry's ability to play it, to run their basic offense and end up at the top, either after setting a screen and hitting the 3. He's 6 for 10 the last 2 games. He's 11 for 19 the last 5 games, I think it is, from 3. I mean, these are things, if you can run sets to create stuff like that, you'd be a fool not to. So I get maybe why Hubert has stuck with it, because, and also you look at some of the lumpiness of Kyan Evans's process here. But with Seth out there, Seth's got that motor. And if you've got that motor that needs to move and cut and pass and do all the things that he can do naturally with the ball and stress the defense, and you got the other 2, I don't think we're going to see as many sets moving forward as we have been, simply because I think he's got 3 guys on the floor, and even Luke as a passer when he's out there, or Powell because of how he can move and spot up and catch and shoot, where these guys, I think, can play off each other so well, David. And you got high-end performers with the things that they're doing. I'm not sure we're going to see 80% sets moving forward, maybe 65%. And it's been around 80 or 85. What do you think about that? What do you think about Seth saying, yeah, I think, we kind of flow. We're a little bit more fluid at times. I'm putting words in his mouth, but that's sort of what he intimated. A little more fluid and quick hitting when Hubert allows them to just kind of play ball based on the principles that have been taught.
I want everybody that's listening to kind of watch for this moving forward, because this is an idea that I have, and not because it's my idea, but just from watching. I think, number one, it's not going to be 80% sets, because North Carolina's defense, they pitch shutouts on so many possessions where teams don't score. Off misses, off turnovers, where the other team doesn't score. They push the ball. They've got Henry playing a lag or the trail. And if they don't get it, they throw to Henry. Henry versus Hubert passes and ball screens behind it. He hands off with that screen. They get that. Okay? That's one thing that I've noticed. And I did it in the last film review. And you remember there was one of those I said, do you remember last year when they'd get right in the middle of this stuff and pull the ball out?
Yep.
You've got a great, because he can shoot the ball and he can handle it and pass it and move it. You've got a tremendous trail guy in Henry Vasar. So when they're going into their secondary or a break, they don't get it. That's what they're going to. They're hitting him back in the middle and they're getting the ball reversed and they're just good playing. Now, when do they do that? When the other team doesn't score. Well, their team, according to their defensive numbers, is not scoring a lot. So you get that, okay? Now, you will get sets, but here's one thing I've noticed, Andrew. They'll run some quick hitters. They do run sets, and there's so much movement by all the players in their sets. It's just not one guy screening for another one and everybody standing around watching. You've got back screen. I'm back screening Henry to the post, and then I'm getting a down screen for this, and then or you'll have 3 guys in action, 4 guys in action, and everybody, you get this guy screening for this one, screener, everybody's moving, okay? But the thing that I've noticed about them, I noticed the other night against East Carolina, and I made this point in articles this week in the film review, what I call their second actions or their second side actions have been really good. So they run their play. It doesn't work. Instead of pulling the ball out and setting it up or running something else, man, they're just getting that pass or reversed it, setting the ball screen behind it. So if it doesn't work, they're on to just play it. And Roy was great at that.
Absolutely.
If I could ask Roy Williams anything in the world, really, that's what I would have asked him. How did you go so seamlessly into your secondary, into an offensive set? Because you couldn't tell where one stopped and where the other one started. And I see that this year, but I think a lot of that's got to do with Henry. He's such a good ball mover out at the top. So, but once they run their sets, one thing will happen after all the movement. A lot of times when they set that ball screen, it gets moved, they screen on the wing, or you've got an empty side. The screener and the ball's only 2 on that side, so it's empty side. Then they can get it moved. But then if you rotate, they make the extra pass. They're able to attack. Trimble now back in the lineup gives them that attacker. So I just think the overall movement is so good. That's how I see sets compared to just letting them play, and kind of how when you're going to see, which one.
Yeah, and the percentage I was talking about was more once there is the secondary's gone and they have to get into something. Obviously, they're able to transition more with Seth, obviously. But one of the things I pointed out that is very apparent, and I think this is kind of what you're alluding to just in the last 2 games alone, is when transition wasn't there before, they did pull out a lot and start stuff. There's less discernible line now.
Yeah.
And Seth gives them that kind of athlete Roy always had, so he could do that with. And I think Seth, being a smart guy, knows how to get the ball and keep it. He doesn't have to pull it back out and call play number 2 and go back into it. He enables them to just sort of play ball. But they do a lot of 2-man. They do a lot of action stuff. And I think what we're seeing, and this is what you're telling me, correct me if I'm wrong, is they are learning how to get into actions without having to call actions. And part of that is they have tremendous chemistry, but a huge part of it is they got 5 guys on the floor sometimes that can pass the ball, and they're very aware, and they know where one another is. And I think that even though Seth has only played in 4 games, he's no fool. He knows where the strengths are. So they're starting to connect strength to strength to strength, which allows that stuff to happen fairly fluidly.
But you know something, going back, and I'm going to correct myself here from where we started out, they can do that with Kyan Evans on the floor, so maybe he's not as bad at the point guard spot as we think he is. So,
but isn't that what Ogilvy was talking about? If you haven't, I put it on our board, what Terrence said the other day, and you know him. You know, Terrence, isn't that kind of what he was alluding to with Kyan? Just like there's a patience there that you allow him to take baby steps while everything is happening. All of a sudden you wake up in the middle of February and maybe the baby steps are complete.
Yeah.
And where he needs to be with this thing.
Yeah. I hope I could come back on here in March and say, I don't know a thing. He made a liar out of me. And you know, we all want to see that. But like you say, we saying that on one hand, and then when you watch on the other one, that yes, they are getting into their offense. They are. It is much more seamless than it's been in the past. And like I said, they're doing it. If Kyan's at the point, they're doing it. If Trimble's handling it, they're doing it. If Derek Dixon's handling it. So there is something to be said for the collective, the whole group, that they're able to get into offense.
Last thing I want to talk about is you mentioned it earlier, the schedule coming up, ACC play only moving forward. This time a year ago, you'd look ahead to the ACC schedule, you're like, man, there's a lot of pressure to win a couple of those games because that's going to be their meal ticket to get into the NCAA tournament. It's different now. I broke down everything about the schedule and what they've done so far, just in a net, quad 1, quad 2, quad 3 standpoint. And as of today, December 26th, the remaining 18 games that they have are all the ACC games. 10 today would be quad 1 games. 5 would be quad 2. 5 would be quad 3. One of the quad 2s is at Stanford. There's 76 in the net. They move up 1 point. There's 75, and that's a quad 1. That would be 11 quad 1 opportunities based on today. Obviously, this stuff is fluid. It changes a whole lot. But what we're looking at with this team's schedule moving forward and what they can achieve, we're still going to talk quad and net as much as Jacob Turner doesn't want to. But now we're talking about the possibility of playing themselves into Greenville, the opening week of the end of the NCAA tournament. The other 7 sites are flights for media. The team will fly to Greenville. They'll fly to Winston-Salem probably, but they'll fly to Greenville. But everything else is far away. They'll have a ton of fans in Greenville. That's where they were in 2017 when they started the last title run. And then the East region is in Washington, D.C., which would be the best spot for them. You've obviously got UConn, but if you're going to be a 2, doesn't hurt to be a 2 in Washington, D.C. If you have to go against UConn at some point anyway, probably. So might as well play them there where there's a ton of Carolina fans. Your thoughts moving forward on the schedule and the fact that they're going to have at SMU, at Stanford, at Cal, at Virginia in succession in a span of about 3 weeks in January, which very well could be 4 quad 1 games.
Last year's schedule was a nightmare. It was top heavy on the front end. We have just Auburn and Alabama and Florida. And just it was horrific. And Michigan State. So you dig yourself a hole, and then there's nobody to play in the ACC to dig your way out. So it was top heavy on the front end. And, we're having this talk about the team getting better and progressing. There wasn't any of that this last year. It was like, you've got Duke and Clemson, and that's it. And when Wake Forest petered out and Pitt did as well, I mean, that was the worst thing that could happen. So you remember last year, we were doing a podcast late in the season. I said, look, North Carolina's got an ACC problem. That the ACC has not been good the last few years, and North Carolina has had heck to pay because of it. And it's really hurt them. Well, this year, it's different. I do think they had the scheduling in mind that they did not want to get caught up in that again. And, they have played Michigan State and of course, Ohio State. We know that's kind of built in. But they played Kentucky, they played Kansas, so Michigan State. They played 3 really good teams, then Ohio State came in. But it's not been like every game you turn around, they're playing somebody like that. Like you said, you would like to see them play some tougher teams. But so you get off to that start. But now on the other side, as you get into the ACC, it's worked out perfectly because the league's better. At least you hope it's going to be better. And North Carolina needs these games. As much as people don't want to hear it, the ACC needs North Carolina State to be good. It needs Virginia to be good. It needs Miami. It needs some of these teams to be good. And no matter how bad you hate them, because it's going to help North Carolina because now you've actually got quad 1 chances here without having to play Murderer's Row in November and December, just game after game after game after game. Yeah. And it can tank your season early. So, like I said, I think they scheduled to not get caught up again. And that, again, I think they scheduled to try to build up a good record. I do. But that's okay because looking at the ACC this year, that looked more like the SEC and Big 12 and some of these major conferences in the past where everybody you're playing is, like you say, a quad 1 opportunity. That's going to do nothing but help. And look, if North Carolina does lose a game, people don't need to be jumping off bridges, if that happens, because that's part of the process. They've only lost one game coming in. I mean, what did they lose 2 years ago? Only 6 or 7 games, I think, when they were the 1 seed.
They were 10-0 ACC playing 18-2 or something like that when Georgia Tech beat them.
So, if you go through and look, I think the league's going to be much better this year than it was 2 years ago. So, they could lose a couple. That's okay. They need the league to be tough, but they've got a chance, like you say now, because of what they've done early in the season and the opportunity to put some quad ones in there to, like you say, hopefully maybe play Greenville, Washington, D.C. That'd make it a lot easier on you. So, but they've got that opportunity's there. Last year, there was no chance of that at this time last year, but it was just that schedule was just so out of kilter. Everything that you didn't want in the schedule was there. And this year, I think just about everything you do want in the schedule has been there and will be there.
Remember, they won 6 in a row in mid to late February last year and didn't move up a ton in the net.
I told you, I thought they were playing. People were saying, I'm like, look, they're playing a dregs of basketball society. I mean, you should have gone to prison for child abuse for playing those 6 teams. But now it's not going to be like that as much this year.
If anybody in this league wins 6 games in a row in conference play, they're going to skyrocket in the net. Anybody. And I could be mistaken off the top of my head. I don't think they go 3 straight games right now. Based on what the net rankings are at this moment, I don't think they go 3 straight games without playing a quad 1 game. It's going to make them better as well. I do think the league is probably as good as it's been since 19 when they had 3 1 seeds and Virginia won the national title. And that was the Zion Duke team. And that was the Carolina team that was sick as hell in Kansas City throwing up when they lost to Auburn. They could have had three teams in the Final Four that year.
Let me ask you this in all seriousness. How much drudgery was it last year for you on a cold January, February day where you said, oh, God, I got to go watch them play Boston College today or Virginia Tech, and they're playing the gangs can't shoot straight. And I mean, I know how hard it was to watch it. And so I'm hoping this year in the ACC that you've got games. And look, I understand the loyal North Carolina fan. Hey, it's game day. I only get 35 of these a year. I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. I'm not in that boat, okay? They're like, I want to see good basketball. I want to see games that I can get excited about.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll go through the ACC season this year and say, hey, you know something? I'm not making a used car sales pitch here. This is not Andrew Jones' Honest Used Car Lot. I'm actually excited about going to cover this game or to watch this game or to talk about this game. I hope we have a bunch of them like that this year. I don't want to go through last year's AC schedule ever again.
Is that a rhetorical question, or does that require a response?
No, it does. I'm just telling you.
I will tell you this.
I don't want to go through that again.
I'll go ahead and take the bait.
If I would have had to watch Georgia Tech if I would have covered Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Boston College, and you had to sit through their games, I mean, I'd find me a 5-lane to run across,
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have to cover them. I will say this. I consider every game a blessing. I was excited for East Tennessee last week because to me, I didn't study journalism in college. I studied computer science and
yeah, I can tell by your technological skills.
Oh God. I mean, my computer science career.
You caught me totally off guard with that. There's no way. I would say
my computer science
had a theology degree before.
Absolute truth. My computer science career started with me making a 3x5 card. On one side, it had DOS, And on the other side, I flip whatever disk operating system. I mean, I should, that was, talk about being in the wrong lane, man. That was like me choosing to be a fashion model. That's about, I had about.
Oh yeah, if you'd have told me you was a missionary to China, I would have took it before that.
I don't know anything about technology, but my point is that I know what it's like in the other world, and I sometimes complain about the grind, and it is a tremendous grind, but I love it. I embrace it, and I never think, oh, I gotta watch this crap tonight. But I do loathe the storyline that is a negative storyline that doesn't change, because I try to come up with ways to tell the story and to break things down that maybe will give even the avid, ardent fan who knows what they're looking at a little more than what they thought, a little more than what they considered. And it was very difficult to do that last year, because when they lost, it was the same storyline. And you also could see that it wasn't going to get a whole lot better. You try to think, okay, well, Hubert's going to go small here. We understand why he did. Then he went super small and he stayed to, like, Hubert was kind of late to the party with a few things last year, making some adjustments. But in the end, what did he really have? Which goes back to what I brought up 45 minutes ago. He's got flexibility now. He didn't have a year ago. He can go point to Jonathan Powell and say, go in there for Derek, because we need to get a steal with 48 seconds left. And they get the steal, or 20 or whatever it was, 33 seconds left. And they got the steal, and they ended up winning the game. And because he had three great defensive players on the floor, he has that now. He didn't have that a year ago. I will say it's an honor and a blessing to cover a game. It's a lot more intriguing and fun when you have a variety of storylines like this year's team. It got to a point here a little while ago where I started thinking, man, Caleb and Henry are scoring way too many points. And I still think that might be an issue. They might be over-reliant on them. They need other guys to pop and produce. And adding Seth obviously helps, because teams can get stuck and not grow as much because they're constantly looking for these two to bail them out. We see how things evolve during the course of the year. So for me personally, I hope it doesn't get like that, because I don't want to write that same thing about, well, it's just the two of them and everybody else had 19 points and the bench scoring wasn't that great. I think you could have great bench scoring with this. I think you could have flare-up guys off the bench with this. That will make it even more fun, because I got a lot more different things to write about and talk about.
But it's funny that you said that. What did they do the last two possessions against Ohio State? They basically just ball screened out of just eye candy. And it got Seth on the side, and they went one-on-one in isolation for Seth Trimble off the wing for the last two possessions of the game. So that was what they wanted to do. Yeah. They wanted to go to Seth Trimble.
Yeah. I think that we're learning more about Hubert now. I think Hubert's done a good job with this team. A couple of things I've said that have been a little bit criticisms, but the trust thing was big. I talked to you about that when I had that conversation. And the way it came up, and it was initiated by this other person, not me, and it really made me think. And he gave Jonathan Powell an opportunity to show what he could do and how he could mesh. And I think Seth going down helped that, because it meant more minutes. And he trusts Jonathan. He trusted Jonathan to stick him out there in that situation. And that is uplifting to a team when a guy can, even if he played 14, 15 minutes and hit a couple of shots, if he's on the bench as the game is winding down, suddenly the coach points to him, you go out there, you have to be part of a great press defense. It was like 5-on-7 that ended up in a turnover, and you win the game. Everyone's contributing. And I think Hubert feels this team similar to how he did with the club a couple of years ago with Ingram and Cormac Ryan and those guys. But they also had some built-in stuff already with RJ and with Armando. I think the versatility with how he uses guys situationally on this team is more so than that club, because they are deeper. You got starters from previous power conference teams that are on the bench right now, and they can step in and handle stuff. So this is a lot more fun to cover, absolutely, than last year was. But it was always still, I had to drive to Blacksburg and cover a game that night. And they come out and they hit like 9 threes in the first half. Okay, this is different because they haven't hit 9 threes in the last 3 weeks. So at least they did that for me in some of those games. But I will also answer this question saying this. I don't have to watch Boston College play basketball in person this year because they don't play them. That's because they're horrific.
I could have started for Virginia Tech last year, but I'll go to the Boston College game. As you know, when we were THI, we were I was covering North Carolina and Kentucky both with the other company, and so the day that North Carolina played Boston College, I DVR'd it. Was going to watch it coming home that night. I don't live far out in Nashville. Kentucky was at Vanderbilt, and I remember. I don't know if you've ever been in Memorial at Vanderbilt. It's like an old theater. Yeah. And I mean, you are really up in the crow's nest when you're in the crow's nest up there. So anyway, I'm watching both. I've got this going on. I'm watching BC and North Carolina, and I'm like, oh my God, Boston College is going to beat them.
I know.
And you know, and I mean, they basically had them dead in the water, and it didn't get any worse. But the other thing that I remember from that game is I thought this year's North Carolina team reminds me starting out of last year's Kentucky team because Pope came in and everybody he had was in the portal. And he only had one player that ever played for him. And none of them had ever played together. None of them had ever played at Kentucky. I mean, they had a total 100% overall. And Kentucky and North Carolina this year has had more turnover probably than any other team coming into this year in modern day history. And we know that. So Kentucky, they were able to just start playing together. And they were so good in their roles, it was just seamless. And it was a natural. And it kind of feels that way just a little bit with North Carolina, maybe not as much, but all that. The thing that got Kentucky was, and it was that first time they had not had any injuries until that Vanderbilt game. And you look up and there's three guys playing, and you're like, why in the world are these guys playing? Well, they got injuries. Their point guard's out, their center's out. They've got all these injuries. That's one thing too, and that's the big variable with North Carolina moving forward that you never know about. They've just got to keep people healthy. I mean, who would have thought that Seth Trimble would have to miss 7 or 8 games in the way that he, you know, a weight room incident. So you never know. And so you're just hoping. That's the big thing to me as this thing, as Hubert mixes and matches going forward and tries to get players to build confidence, as we said, and has his rotations. You hope that he has the opportunity to tinker and it's not out of necessity. So, you know, everybody say a prayer here that, you know, that the luck factor will be in North Carolina's favor going forward, and there's not going to be injuries.
I hope that's the case because I want to see what he does. I want to learn more about Hubert as a coach. I think year 5, I get the criticism, and I've been critical too, and I totally get it. I also think that North Carolina is a different standard. You can't say, yeah, well, look what he's at North Carolina. That would be great for Cincinnati. But yeah, but it's not Cincinnati. It's North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he knows that. He knows it as well. He knows it, and he understands they have to have a really big year. I also think now that he knows what he has, he recognizes they can have a very big year, which goes back to the initial thing we talked about, and we'll close out on this. How he handles Evans and Dixon and whatever else he chooses to do with that spot, I think ultimately will determine where this team is in March, because they've got the other parts. People can just sit back and let Luka do what Luka's got to do. He told me the other night he's in the process still. He's still learning the philosophy on both ends of the floor, all that kind of stuff. Allow it time. He's played a lot of basketball. He's a smart dude. People have been dogging him some, but he averaged 12 and a half, 13 points a game through the 9 games that Seth was out, or at least the 9 games Seth was out. So there's a good player there that just is still feeling things out. I think it ultimately is going to be staying healthy, number 1. Number 2, what Hubert does with that point guard spot. Hubert likes to say, oh, we're positionless, when he's sort of deflecting away a question about a position of concern, but then he'll come back and tell you, boy, Henry's a great 5 for us, that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it and what he says when he's asked questions about how he's handling it. And I think that's ultimately going to determine where this team is. They have a lot of parts that I've seen get very far in the NCAA tournament and win 30 games. They've got parts to do that. I've seen this stuff up close a lot in my life, and I know what they have. But I am not convinced that at the one, they have what's necessary to get to Indianapolis. And I think how that unfolds over the next 2 months will be the single most fascinating part of this team.
Well, I've already started the Joe Lunardi watch. So, they were like, early on, they were like a 6 seed, and that was kind of the thought. They come in somewhere around 24th, 25th. They were on that 6. And I said, all right, that means you've got a 3 right off the bat. Hubert needs to get through the first weekend. And so, but as I watched, and remember, we spoke about this before the season started. I told you, I from everything I was hearing and just kind of watching scrimmages and all that, I'd moved them up a little bit. I had them borderline top 20. I thought they were a 5 starting out. Just it's what it looked to me like. They looked to me about like, and it's gotten better and better and better. Now they've played their way on most of these, and you see projections already, and they're about a 4. So, that's good because you feel like you're in a pretty good setting now with a 4, and I think you're going to move up. I think they'll move up much more. I think
that's a 4 with Seth missing 9 games.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a 2-3 somewhere around that range in case it just really falls off. 3 anyway. So you feel pretty good about getting through the first weekend. But then, I think you feel much better where right now they're the 4, and the ones that I've been seeing, they've got them with Arizona, and I think Arizona's Michigan, the best 2 teams in the country. And you're like, man, I don't want to get called across from Arizona in the Sweet 16 game. But then again, I don't know if Arizona would want to get called across from North Carolina. I mean, I don't know if that's one you'd want. So, but the thing is, I think as they keep playing this up and they keep playing well, they keep winning games, and I think that helps them with their seeding, but they win more regular season games. I guess what I'm saying, and I think the big elephant in the room was Hubert on any type of hot seat. I think he keeps heaping up at himself, and I really do. So I think you're looking at a North Carolina team, to me, they've got 31 games, and I think I don't remember what I'd said, maybe 24-7, something like that. I thought maybe going into the year. I think this could be a 25-6 team, a 26-5 team going into the ACC tournament. You win a game or two in the ACC tournament and then go through the first weekend, and there's that team you're talking about. You've won 30 games going into the Sweet 16. And I think that's totally possible. They've got to stay free from injury and all that. But I guess one thing I'm saying, I really feel good about, the future going forward. And Hubert had all that hot seat talk going on. That was hanging over him last year. And, of course, it never was really true. I mean, they were working on a GM and all those things, so we know there was nothing to that. But at least you don't have all the rumors and all that hanging around. And I believe he's worked himself into a situation to where not only do you have to listen to that, but he's probably going to get an extension.
Last thing. The question about can a freshman thrive and be a star under Hubert Davis? That's no longer a question. The question is, can he go get a big from somewhere else and have that big improve his stock and become an NBA player? That's no longer in question as well. Those 2 things have been determined, and it's not even New Year's. Henry's an NBA player. Caleb's a superstar, and both have happened there, and one's been allowed to happen. Another one has occurred since Henry arrived. And he's already got those 2 things to sell, which is massive, especially considering who just visited, who was in town here earlier this week.
C.J. Ross.
Yeah, and also what they're going to have to go after. So I would say that a lot of needles are pointed in the right direction around Carolina basketball right now. I would say every needle is pointed in the right direction.
But I think it's going to be very interesting even after the season, and I've already thought about this, and this is a whole nother show. But with James Nagy going to Baylor, here's the next step I think that you're going to see in college basketball in the NCAA. I think the withdrawal date's going to be gone. So you've got the draft in like June 28th, June 26th, somewhere every year, and they've got like at the end of May to pull out. So they do that, but it's still late. So the coaches are going into June really not knowing what their roster is going to look like. I think now they go into July. I think, and it's not going to affect Caleb Wilson. Caleb Wilson's going to be top 4, top 5 pick. But right now, and I saw this of Adam Finkelstein, he's got Henry 26th in the next draft. So what if something happens where he falls just a couple of spots and there's 31 right there? I think it's 31 first round. If I'm off by 1. So let's say he falls a couple and he's at the top of that second round, or he says, you know what? They're telling me with the feedback I've got, if I come back for a year, I could be 15 next year. What does he decide to do? Because he could make a ton of NIL at North Carolina. So NIL and that. So it's going to be interesting to see guys. I think guys will go into draft night, and if they don't like where there's drafted at, they can decide to come back. I think it'll happen this year, and it's going to be interesting moving ahead just to see what they put on the floor next season.
David, I think the 5th year is going to pass too, and I think Seth Trimble will have an opportunity as well.
Yeah.
I think that I've been talking about it for a while. I think now we've reached a point where they're going to have to, or get off the pot with that. And I think every sign is pointing in the direction. And yes, they recognize it's better for everybody, quite frankly, better for the health of the sport, and to have those guys have a 5th year. And so you could very well see Seth Trimble in a Carolina uniform next year.
There's no amateur, and like I said, we're going down a whole different trail here.
Yeah.
But there's no amateurism now. There's none. And because
the Najee thing,
when Rick Barnes, who is the oldest throwback in the game, is telling his players, I paid you $500,000 to come here and make 3-pointers, and by gum, you better make 3-pointers because that's what you're getting paid to do, which is what he tells his players. That's that. But you go to the 5th year, how many guys can play athletics? And not even if you don't play athletics, it's hard to get out 4 years.
Yeah.
College is about a 5-year deal now. And I've always said that. I mean, it is tough to get out in 4 years. So to me, a 5th year makes sense anyway, because that's the college experience.
Well, the next thing after that is going to be, and I know that in Mac Brown, we're talking football here. Mac really believed this as well. I had a really good conversation with him about this about 2.5 years ago. These athletes need to get 3 credits per semester for their sport. You could be on a dance on a dance scholarship, and dance can be your major. You could be in a music scholarship, music could be your major. So I think athletes maybe not major in their sport, but they should at least get academic credit for it and still get the 5 years. And what you're doing is you're also giving the guy who's not going to play even in Europe or in Australia making $110,000 a year, you're giving them chances to load up even more in their education. So you can't just pitch the superstar factor of it. You get to pitch the extra year and the more credit hours and maybe an extra degree or a master's degree, that kind of thing. That pitch is in the works. Those are conversations that happen behind the scenes. There are a lot of coaches that are conscientious enough, like the Mac Browns, like a Rick Barnes, who will make that part of the pitch, because guess what? Whoever wins the national championship this year is going to have a guy helping them who isn't going to play overseas and make much money. He's not going to play in the NBA here, but he's a pretty good player. And he's a piece that helps you win. And you need those pieces. And I think that's the other part of what's coming for. We can actually go forever on this. We've already done an hour and a half. We're going to close out. But that's another thing, David. There's a lot of change that's coming. And it's about time that these kids get academic credit. Because I will challenge every kid majoring in whatever it is at any university to go learn an offensive defensive playbook in football. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, basketball is, you're already given majors in sports management. And basketball is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's an industry. It's not a game. It's an industry. So, but like I said, I'm a revolutionary on this as far as my thoughts on the whole thing. Andrew, I was saying all the way back in the 90s on record that conferences need to be disbanded. And they need to take the European Soccer League model as far as football scheduling goes. I've been saying that for years.
I think football conferences will be over soon, yeah.
And I know basketball is different, but look, you just can't go the way that you've been going well, this is what they did back in the 50s. It's a totally different world now, and it'll take time for it to change. And I think the reason I'm saying all this was because the way North Carolina is going to go about in the future, getting players, it doesn't even resemble what it did a couple of years ago. There are going to be so many options on the way you can go out and acquire talent and get players there's going to be ways that if you told us right now, hey, North Carolina's going to have a player 34 years ago, this is how they got him, it would totally blow our minds.
And you know what? And I'll close with this. And I think that's why the importance of Jim Tanner is going to be even more exponential than it has been already because of his past, his contacts, and his professional lineage. So he's definitely a phenomenal person to have in that spot, and his department's going to grow as a result because they're going to have to keep tabs on so dang much. David,
you may look up one day and say, they signed this guy named Rasheed Wallace. That rings a bell. Where do I know that name from?
I got to admit, man, when I saw the stuff with Najee, I was like, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. We're going somewhere where –
But there were like three other guys that were in the same boat. Utah got one. There were like three other guys that signed that they're going to be eligible second semester. So
yeah.
And Coffee Cockburn, that's the next one to watch, man. There's like five. There's like some big-time schools after him. That's another – there's going to be several more.
It's uncomfortable at this moment, but by the time it all comes in and starts happening, we adapt. I haven't fully adapted. There's an element of excitement where you can get good fast. You can get healthy fast. How about coaches that, boy, they're not really recruiting that well. They're good coaches, but they're not recruiting out of high school that well because they don't really resonate that well with 17-year-olds and their parents. But kids that have been in college for a couple of years that have had totally different experiences and had a little dose of reality, they might register well with those guys. I think Brad Brownell is a good example of that. Yeah. I think Brad doesn't resonate great with the 16-year-olds, but you can tell me guys like Nick Davidson, perfect playing for a guy like him. And that's why I think he's consistently going to be good now. Clemson's going to have money for him to spend, but Brad can find those dudes that will work for him that have already been in college, that are young adults, they're making some money, and it makes the most sense for him. So guys like him can stick around longer. And the ones that have done a great job bringing kids out of high school, but haven't done a great job with them once they arrive, are not attracting dudes in the portal. And I submit to you, Jeff Capel is Exhibit A.
And I'll say this too, and this will be the last thing I say. God, we're here and get this on my chest. And this is something I never hear anybody say. And I don't even know how I'm talking about for athletes. I'm talking about for the general student. There are different college experiences.
Yep.
How many individuals do you know that went off, they didn't go to college when they got out of high school? They went into the workplace and they said, you know what? I see now, I'm not going to move up the food chain unless I have a degree, or I have a degree to get this spot in the company. And they go back, and they may be in their 20s and their 30s or older, and they go back and they're a college student. And I've seen valedictorians at firsthand that you go, and a valedictorian's 40-something years old. And so it's you see that all the time. So why pigeonhole it into athletic? And look, people are going to disagree, and that's fine. We don't want to get off. But I'm just saying the college experience for everybody, anybody that wants it and wants to earn it, it's there. So I don't know that should be any difference for athletics.
Things are changing. We should just come on one day and have this conversation by itself. We've actually done an hour and a half, and I said, maybe we can get out of here in 30, 35. No. Jay. Yeah, I was dumb enough to – and, you and I were going to do two. And I said, let's just stick it to one. So we're sticking to one. We're going to end right now. We'd love to know what you guys think about all the different things that we've talked about. We certainly veered off into this area, but it's an important area. And the future of college athletics, I think, is uncertain in a lot of ways. And I agree with you. I think football conferences will be over fairly soon, and it's going to be everything else, and there's going to be tiers and all that kind of stuff, and you will not.
We'll do one. Let's do a podcast sometime, and we can go the football route, not give you my ideas, because I've had them for 30 years.
Yeah, we're not going to see rematches between Tulane and Ole Miss in the next model. We're not going to see JMU out in Eugene, Oregon, and Oregon toying with them in a playoff while Alabama or while Notre Dame sits at home and doesn't get into the field. So anyway, we'll see a different model down the road, and people will adapt and they'll love it because that's what we are. The numbers are off the charts.
You'll be happy with mine. There won't be any dissension whatsoever, and more importantly, it will be able to get through the legal system. So the NCAA would have nothing to worry about.
I agree with you, and that's all coming. He's David. I'm AJ. Hey, make sure you go to TarHeal247.com and get loaded information about everything going on with UNC football, basketball. We cover the other sports too. And remember, we are growing. We are adding to our staff. We are growing. Noah and I are everywhere they go, except he's not going to California. He's staying back to help with the portal coverage, but we are growing. We're getting bigger. We have absolutely everything going on our site. And we've got David Sisk, man. Can't lose. We've got Mr. Sisk. Anyway, we appreciate y'all stopping by. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get updates every time we upload a podcast, which is often. And make sure you check out the pod I do with Ellie Bowman about Caleb Wilson and dunking and his missed dunks. You will not want to miss that. We appreciate y'all stopping by. Thank you.